Big board showcasing this weekend in the Big Ten starts tomorrow night with the Ducks and the Boilers. We've got Wisconsin Northwestern early on Saturday, Michigan, Illinois, the only battle of ranked teams, unless you go by the coaches poll, in which case Nebraska, Indiana qualifies as well. That game getting the big noon coverage from Fox. And Fox Sports lead game analyst Joel Klatt joining us now to talk more about what's going on in the world of Big Ten football. And Joel, let's start by looking back. Oregon-Ohio State was the game of last weekend in college football, and it lived up to the hype. You and I talked a lot about it a week ago and the build-up to it. After watching the game, what stood out to you the most about Oregon's win?
Oh, man. I mean, just how well they played. I thought Oregon played a great game. No, I mean, did they play a perfect game? No, by no means. But they did things that we hadn't seen them do during the course of the season. You know, they got really explosive throwing the ball down the field. Dylan Gabriel was 4 of 4 on throws of 20 or more yards down the field. That was huge. We saw their offensive line protect well. And remember early in the season against teams like Idaho and Boise State, that wasn't the case, Rev. Oregon struggled up front. They've retooled in the middle of that offensive line, and they've gotten better and better and better, and now they haven't given up a sack in like their last 3 or 4 games. So I was so impressed with that. Gabriel was tremendous. Their offense, obviously being so explosive. And then on the flip side, I think the thing that was surprising, at least to me, from Ohio State is that they gave up so many big plays. You remember 2 years ago that was all we talked about was the big plays that Ohio State gave up. And then last year, all we talked about was that they minimized giving up explosive plays. So to see that creep up again, I'm sure it's frustrating for Buckeye fans. And the only thing that I can point to, yeah, there were some structural things and there was man coverage and people are going to say, hey, you know, our secondary got beat too often. Where was the pass rush? You know, this was a defensive line that was supposed to be able to get to the quarterback. No sacks on Dylan Gabriel, and I think that that's a problem.
I'm with you. You give a ton of credit to Oregon, as you said. I mean, they have improved dramatically. Like when we were talking about Oregon early in the year, we talked about the offensive line, to your point, both in pass protection and they weren't running the ball in those first couple games to the level that we expected them to. And then we talked about the defensive line. Obviously, Ashton Jennings really good, and that was part of it. But they held Ohio State to a season-low rushing yards in that game. So you talk about the defense and the big plays. If you're Ohio State this week and you go into this bye week and you start to break down that film, and again, you're one play away from winning that game, and I saw that you have them number 3 in your rankings this week, so it's not like you've dropped them precipitously. But other than that pass defense, what are the things that you're working on as you enter into this bye?
Yeah, well, they've got to run the football more efficiently. So you look up and are the stats terrible? No. And then you look deeper and you realize, like, okay, if you strip out that 53-yard run from Travion Henderson, on the other, 32 attempts, they averaged 2.8 yards per attempt. That has to be better. With those 2 backs and a quarterback that can also run it, you can't run the football that ineffectively. And so that has to change. And then on the defensive side, they have to get pressure on the quarterback. And too often, I thought that they were just trying to rush 4 straight ahead. There were some times when they tried to play some really exotic coverages and drop everybody out and only rush 1 and 2 players. And that has to change, because if you look back to when Ohio State was at their best defensively, I go back to that 2019 year, and did they have a historically great player? Yes, Chase Young. But what did he allow them to do? Play aggressive in the secondary, because they knew he would get to the quarterback. And what we saw on Saturday is that the defensive backs had to cover for far too long. Long, slow developing double move routes are really tough to cover. I don't care who you are. And the pass rush has to get home.
Well, let's move on to this week. I'm so intrigued by the big noon game. I love that you guys are going to Indiana. There's going to be so much excitement there. Sold out Memorial Stadium, homecoming. You got an undefeated team. You got big noon in town. It's going to be an incredible, incredible day there. Obviously playing a Nebraska team that does have 1 loss, but is also vastly improved. I know you watch a ton of film in preparation for these games, Joel. Indiana, the defense is good and is certainly a lot better, but the offense has really been the story. Second in the nation in scoring. What do you see when you turn on the film?
So I see a unit that plays above their talent level. That seems like a knock. It's not meant to be. That means that they are incredibly well coached, that the schematics are solid. They do what they're supposed to do. They play with great detail, Rev. These guys, whether it's the offensive line, the backs, the wide receivers, or quarterback Curtis Rourke, they play with great detail. One of the things I've loved about watching them and getting to know them throughout the week as I prepare for the game is you start to look at this roster and how it was built with these 27 transfers. 14 of them are starters, 7 on each side of the football, and you think to yourself, like, how can you have any cohesion? But then you realize that, like, 8 or 9 of these starters are actually from JMU and were with Curt Cignetti prior to being at Indiana. So there is some cohesiveness in terms of scheme. And then you look at philosophy, and this is what I wanted to stress on. I know you asked a schematic question, but I think it goes to the philosophy in the transfer portal. Curt Cignetti wanted a couple of things out of the transfer portal. Yes, quality players, but guys that had played a lot of football, 4 winning programs, and that have a chip on their shoulder. And it's like, enter Curtis Rourke, and here he is, and he's playing phenomenally. He really is, and they've got good wide receivers, they've got good backs, and the offensive line, for the most part, is playing what I would say is above their talent level. They're cohesive, they do a good job protecting him, and they do a solid job in the run game. Is it spectacular? No, but then at the end of the day, you look up and you're like, the numbers are spectacular, and trust me, I'd rather have numbers than a bunch of 5 stars up front.
And yet now they go up against a Nebraska defense that will be the best defense that they have seen this year. And Nebraska gets a ton of pressure on the quarterback. They lead the Big Ten in sacks. They lead the Big Ten in tackles for loss. What do you think of the strength versus strength matchup here, and how well equipped is Nebraska to slow down this Hoosiers attack?
So for how well the season has started for Indiana, I would say that they've faced little adversity on the offensive side. Maybe the first half against Maryland. You know, I'm watching that game. There's a couple of interceptions. Weather was bad. Maybe that's adversity for this Indiana offense. They're going to face it on Saturday because this defense, as you said, gets after it. Tony White, their defensive coordinator, Rev, I think he's probably, I don't want to like blow it out of proportion, he's probably in the top 5 in the sport in terms of coordinators. I think he's fantastic. What they do is they put a lot of pressure on the opposing quarterback, not just with guys in his face, but also the mental side. Like, what are they doing on the opposite side? What's the change up in picture going to be in the secondary? And because of that, what you see is the opposing quarterback constantly having to just pat the ball one more time or one extra time. And that half beat allows the rush to arrive and the pressure to get there. So it's the combination of confusing the quarterback and getting after it up front that proposes a lot of problems for opposing offenses. And they've done a really tremendous job. I can't wait to watch them live, to be honest with you.
This should be an incredible matchup. As I said, IU fans have been waiting a long time for this.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a great scene as well. Excited for you and Gus and Jenny to get there and to bring this game to us. Should be a really, really good day. Appreciate you taking the time out. Enjoy Bloomington, and we'll talk to you next week.
You got it, Rev. Have a good one, bud.